Dr. Mustache.
My name's Boo.
I am Minion.
I'm Turbo.
I'm Rue. I'm Pyro.
First question that a camper asked is, how can I deal with my overprotective parents with managing my diabetes?
That's a big question. It's a really common question. Turns out that parents are pretty protective. Like that's what they like to do. They like to keep you safe. But that can also drive you crazy because when someone's following you around trying to keep you safe all day long, then it can start to feel a little suffocating, and sometimes it can make you also feel like, gosh, don't you just trust me to take care of myself? Like I can totally do this. So those are all very real things. Some things that I think are super useful. One, I think the most important one is just to have a real respectful, honest, open conversation with your parents. It would sound something like this, like, wow, Dad, I can see that you really worry about my blood sugars a lot. I can see that you worry about me, whether I'm dosing. I can feel like you don't ever want to let me out of your sight. I gotta say, it's kind of hard sometimes. It's kind of hard like that. And just kind of say what you are observing, see how your parents respond. And that's just a great way of starting a conversation and not starting a fight. I think when you start the fight, everyone's going to feel defensive, and it usually doesn't go to a good place.
One of the things that I would say has worked well for me and for some other people is going off what Dr. Mustache said, is like when you're having that conversation, talking about boundaries and what compromises you can make with your parents where they still feel comfortable and then you also feel like a little pressure is taken off of you. So trying to find that middle ground where it's like, maybe you tell them what your blood sugar is 3 times a day, even though you're checking 5 times a day, and they have to trust that you're checking those other 2 times a day, but they still feel comfortable because they know your number 3 times a day. So it's just having that honest conversation with your parents and seeing where's that middle ground where you can grow and be independent with your diabetes, but they can still feel safe that you're taking care of it.
Sometimes it will take longer than just one conversation to make a parent feel less like they have to be overprotective. It takes a lot of trust building, and that will happen over time. So you have to ask permission, like, let me go get lunch by myself and bullets and prove to you that I can do this small thing, and then your independence can grow. So it's it goes both ways in the relationship. They can stop being overprotective when you show them that you can be independent.
I like that a lot, Rue, especially when you come up with some objective way of showing that you can take responsibility for taking care of your blood sugars. It's really hard for parents not to sort of go along with that. And you can start small, and then as time goes on, you can make those sort of objective ways of proving your responsibility bigger and bigger. But yeah, like I'm gonna go out for an hour or two, and then you're welcome to check my meter afterwards or whatever.
My parents personally were pretty overprotective of all that stuff, so I had to deal with this exact sort of situation. And the main turning point for me was when we set something together to try and prove myself and show that I can manage myself independently. And this mainly started happening when I would go to school. So it's a little bit different in this situation, I'm sure. But at school, I would go all day. I wouldn't tell them my numbers because at the time I didn't have any way of doing that anyways, because I didn't have a phone growing up. But like in middle school, that was the point where it switched over. I started proving myself, getting numbers at school, and now it's even easier with the new CGMs and pumps. Like you can manage this even easier and show like how your blood sugars went all day. And so just proving yourself and like showing that you can take that next step is what's the most important part for me. And so that's what I would definitely suggest for someone else.
How did you prove that, Turbo?
So basically when all of elementary school, I would go to the nurse right before lunch and check my blood sugars and everything. And I think in 6th grade, I had halfway through the year, I stopped going to the nurse, and so I started checking my blood sugars on my own. And so I would like mark down, I would log all my numbers and show everything that was getting me like good results. And then that way, if my parents were seeing that there might be a consistent pattern of me going high right after lunch, then we could adjust like my carb ratios and that sort of thing. And we would talk through that to make it like as easy as possible and more of like a coexisting like relationship rather than just them controlling me. So,
It must have felt pretty good not to have to go to the nurse too.
oh, for sure, it freed up probably 15 minutes of my lunchtime. I got so good at eating fast when I was little, but it definitely opened up. It was a little tough at first. It definitely requires a little bit of work that you're not used to. But once you get past that first step, trust will open up. If you prove yourself well, things are going to get better. So
I actually had a whiteboard that we put on our fridge, and it was like one of the month-long ones, and then we just like put the date just to make it like as a week. And then I had to write down like every day because I just didn't want to be asked about my blood sugars at all ever. I was like, no, leave me alone. And so I had like the morning one, a lunch, and then an afternoon and like a dinner. And then there was a spot if I wanted to put like a before bed. But I had to have at least like breakfast, lunch, dinner. And it was my responsibility to just make sure that I filled that out at some point during the day or like when I tested. Like when I got home from school, I was like, okay, go to the fridge, write down your numbers from this morning and from lunch. And then like as you test, make sure you put those in there as well. And then for a while, I was like, oh, it's not a big deal. But then both of my parents were very like on top of making sure that they asked me like, oh, did you test? Like you didn't write your number down, so you have to go do that. So it became like a daily routine type thing where it's like I know every time I walk in the kitchen, if I haven't filled out that number, like put it there right then. But just being able to like have a visual reminder of like if this is here, then we don't necessarily need to talk about it all the time, but instead we can like they know that I'm being responsible for myself. It was like a good reminder for I think all of us for them to be a little bit more out of my business rather than like constantly asking me.
That brought up a question for me. Um, if you guys don't mind sharing, did you ever make up a number for your parents so they'd get off your back?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yes.
All the time. Like
And how did that work out for you in the long run? Was that like a good strategy or like
that was
no,
what would you say?
No, it doesn't work. So that was an issue for me in middle school. And then I remember one endocrinologist appointment specifically where I walked in and they're like, so you have all these like good blood sugars written down, but your A1C is not mirroring that. What's up? And I was like, I don't know. I guess I'm just like going high at night or something. And obviously nobody believed me. But I realized at that point, like, yeah, I kind of can't do that. Doesn't work. It's not a good idea. It doesn't work. Not good for you.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'd love to hear your other stories about this too, but like one of the things I try to get parents to stay away from is using those kind of labels like liar, cheater, sneaker. They really like add this like level of it's just level of judgment and assessment of your character that really doesn't have anything to do with who you really are. You're just trying to get by, right? You're trying to get by having to do something that nobody else has to do, and you're just
I feel like it's kind of like what Turbo was saying about the coexisting relationship. Like the nicer and more supportive the parent is, like the more honest and open the kid will be, and then the more like independence the parent will give the child. You know, like it goes every direction.